This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Welcome into the Open Mic Night podcast here on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. My name is Tylutki with the debut episode. First time I've ever done a Detroit sports podcast here. It's great to be along for the ride, and we'll be doing this weekly, giving you a little update on whatever Detroit sports topics there are. I hope everybody had a great weekend out there, wherever you were, up north, anywhere like that. For the 4th of July, I know mine was great. I went up north, played some golf up near Lewiston, which is near Alpena and Gaylord. Also watching the Rocket Mortgage Classic a little bit in the city of Detroit. I know no fans this year. It wasn't the same, but it was still a lot of fun to be watching that, and it's just great for the city of Detroit having a big-time PGA event like that. So my weekend was pretty good. I hope yours was as well. But this week we're going to talk a little bit about Lions, a little bit about this new ownership with Sheila Hamp Ford taking over back on June 23rd for her mother, Martha Firestone Ford. And we're also talking to you a little bit about the NFL preseason and how that's going to shake out for the Lions, the NFL cutting the preseason down to 2 games. And later on, we'll be talking to our friend, Mr. Matt Dery, longtime sports radio voice on Detroit's 105.1, The Fan, and also 97.1, The Ticket. So we'll get his insight on some Lions talk later on in the show. I'm going to talk a little bit about this new ownership with the Lions. Of course, William Clay Ford, he was the one that bought the Lions back in 1963, and then he handed it off to his wife, Martha, after he passed away in 2014, and then Sheila Hamp Ford announced a couple weeks ago as the new owner of the Lions. She is 71 years old, only the 3rd time since 1963 that a new owner has come and gone with the Lions. I just want to say this. The Lions, and here's the thing with them. I'm a diehard fan, and I've been a diehard fan for many, many years. Ever since I was a kid, going to games and going to training camp and all that. I follow this team very closely. And I'm not what you call a negative fan. I'm always looking for the positives with this team, but there are some things that I just don't agree with what the Fords are doing, such as keeping Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia still after 2 seasons of them together with just a bunch of ineptitude. It seems like this team is just getting worse and worse, but that's really a story for another day. However, when you just look at the statistics in terms of winning percentages with the Ford family as Lions owners, before 1963, when William Clay Ford bought the team, they won 54% of their games and 3 championships, 2 in the 1950s and 1 in the 1930s. After that, with the Fords, 42%. That is 12 points lower, folks. This just proves what has happened with the Fords as the owners of the Lions. And it's kind of sad to see when you see those statistics. And a lot of it is just ineptitude and wrong decisions, Matt Millen, and all that kind of stuff. But I will say this. I am willing to give Sheila Ford Hamp a chance. And I'll tell you why. There was an article on DetroitLions.com from Mike O'Hara that talked a lot about Martha's style and how it was a lot different than her husband, William Clay Ford. A more hands-on style. Her husband was more reserved. In 2014, she made it very clear that they are not satisfied with just making the playoffs. They want more. And then so she took that initiative right off the bat and fired basically her longtime friends Martin Mayhew and Tom Lewan, both of whom were in the front office for the Lions at the time. So she made it very clear that changes were necessary, and Sheila has been learning from her mother for the past couple years in that role as kind of like assistant to the owner, if you will, or kind of like on the board or something like that. So she's definitely been groomed for the spotlight for a long time. And then hired Bob Quinn, and then later on Matt Patricia. So she at least took some initiative, and I feel like she had some sort of a plan, and that plan seemed to be copying success, basically, because in the NFL, and you hear this all the time, it's a copycat league. And she seemed to have a plan of trying to copy success with the Lions from the New England Patriots. So bringing in Bob Quinn and a bunch of ex-Patriot players to go along with Matt Patricia's scheme and sort of the Patriot way. The Detroit Patriots, I believe, as Michael Lombardi on the NFL Network called the Lions. So It's interesting. It maybe hasn't worked out yet, but we don't know what Sheila's going to do with Quinn Trisha, as I like to call them, Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia. But that question really I can't answer right now, and it's the same with Matthew Stafford. Will they give him another contract after it's done, or will they look to trade him or draft a quarterback? That question, I'm hoping that they will answer with Sheila as the owner. But right now, I'm willing to give her a chance, and I know she's 71 years old. Not a lot of 71-year-olds might not have the youngest and brightest ideas, if you will, but I'm willing to give the Lions here a chance, and I'm looking really optimistic for this. And I know it's the same family. I know all of you Lions fans out there are going to say, oh, it's just the same family and blah, blah, blah. And it is. And I gave you the statistic, 54% versus 42% in the winning percentage column since the Ford family took over. But I really have faith, and I've always had faith with the Lions. And now, if this thing starts to fail in the next 5-10 years, then I might be giving up. But right now, I really, really am hoping that something good happens here with Sheila Hamp Ford as the Lions' new owner. And moving on now, the NFL coming out last week, talking about how they're cutting weeks 1 and week 4 in the preseason. But now the NFL Players Association wants to cancel the rest of the preseason, so that'll be weeks 2 and 3. Training camps are still set to begin in late July, so it's still following the normal schedule. Well, I'll tell you this, and I'm not afraid to admit it. I don't mind preseason football. Okay, there's people out there that say it's boring to watch and all that, but there's something about me, and maybe I'm crazy or something, but I enjoy watching preseason football. And maybe it's just because I like watching football just in general, or I want to see how some of the rookies will do, and but it's the only time of the year that I do not care if the Lions win or lose, because obviously during the regular season, I want them to win, but I don't care if they win or lose. I just want to see what's out there for the Lions. And canceling weeks 1 and 4 of the preseason, I think is okay, because those are really the 2 games that, let's just say, are not really that important, because it's really just backups play the entire game, mostly. The starters will come out and play weeks 2 and 3. And if I were the NFL, to be honest, I would like to keep those 2 and 3. Now, it doesn't matter if there's fans in the stands or not. I don't think there will be. But I think it's important because you're going to see a lot of these rookies, and we all know that these players are staying in shape. There's a video that surfaced about Matthew Stafford, I think, working out at Bloomfield Hills High School with Jesse James and all them throwing routes and all that. So we know that these guys are trying to establish chemistry and all that, even though some of the practice facilities and all that might not be open a whole lot. But I still think it's important to get those reps in a game-like situation, and that's what the preseason gives to guys that are on the bubble, especially like maybe the Ty Johnsons, the Jason Huntleys, a couple of the other late-round draft picks that the Lions drafted in the last couple of years. So I think that the NFL should be keeping weeks 2 and 3 if they can, and really they just need to figure out a way to see if they can really build the chemistry between the newer guys and the older guys in a game-like situation. But we'll see. It'll be a lot different without any fans in the stands this season, but hopefully the NFL can play the regular season right on schedule, and it'll be entertaining. We're all dying for sports over here in Detroit. We're one of the best sports cities in America, and we need some sports right now. So hopefully the Lions will give us some hope, along with the Tigers, who just announced that their 60-game season schedule. So hopefully that'll be good for us deprived sports fans. All right, folks, we have a very special guest here. You might have known him as the Diesel, as a longtime Detroit sports radio voice on WDFN 97.1 and 105.1. It is Mr. Matt Dery. Matt, how are you today?
Great to be with you, Noah. Great to chat with you as always, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing well. Just surviving a summer here, and really, learning how to do a lot of podcasting for sure. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, it's obviously a very crazy game right now, the podcast game. Everybody's kind of hopping in and talking, but that's a good thing.
Oh yeah, no, it is for sure. So what else? I mean, what else have you been really up to lately? I know obviously there's not, no sports going on right now or anything. What's been up with you?
It's been nuts for all of us that love sports, and obviously that that's such a big passion of ours to follow. You're right. It's like, what are you doing to fill your time? What are you watching at night? It's funny. I have so many friends that tell me, oh, have you seen this show on Netflix? Or I'm not a Netflix person. Have you watched this? Have you watched that? I really haven't. I've spent a lot of time with my wife where, we're outside as much as possible, especially after dinner, just sitting outside, hanging out and spend time with the kids and working at my new 9-to-5 job at Financial Architects. We put out a lot of content at the company, whether it's webinars, podcasts of our own or other things. So that's been keeping me busy, but it's kind of been a weird summer, not, getting in front of the TV at 7:00, you watching the Tigers, me watching the Indians. And that's pretty much your summer nights. So it's been a huge void, but, spending quality time with the fam is okay.
In case anybody out there is listening and doesn't know who Matt Dery is, he's a diehard Indians fan in Cleveland, the rivals, if you will. But unfortunately, no baseball right now. But he is an expert in Lions football, been around the city for over 20 years. And he also hosts the Locked On Lions podcast, which I'm a big fan of there. But I just want to get your initial thoughts really about this whole Sheila Hamp Ford taking over as owner. I don't know about you, but my initial reaction was just, it wasn't really that surprising because we all knew that this was going to happen at least sometime or another.
Yeah, I think I was a little bit surprised that it happened when it did in late June when really nothing was going on. But as Sheila said herself, and the audio is all over TroyLions.com, and I had it on my show last week, is that, it was time. They felt it was time. Her mother's 94. She's still in fine health, but they felt like this would be a good opportunity before the season started and training camp came to fruition, if it's going to be on time in late July, to give Sheila this opportunity to kind of get the torch passed to her and for the next few weeks, kind of figure out her plan and what she's going to do and what principal owner means. And, it's a tough time to be doing that when not everybody is in the building and every meeting you're probably having is virtual. She's been at this game the last 5 or 6 years waiting for this moment to happen. Once her father passed away and once Martha's husband, the late owner of the Lions, William Clay Ford Sr., passed away, we kind of all saw that it was going to go in a certain direction. And that was that the girls were going to take over, that this was going to be Martha and Sheila's show, not necessarily Bill Jr.'s show. And so that's how it's kind of been. Sheila's been along for the ride with Mrs. Ford, and now it's her show. So the biggest question is going to be, how is the team going to perform this year? And if they don't perform up to snuff, will Sheila pull the trigger on Quinn and Patricia, even though they have multiple years left on their contracts?
Actually, you brought up an interesting point about Bill Ford Jr. I just wanted to ask that really fast because, some Lions fans out there, I know what I was reading, they were wondering, why isn't Bill Ford Jr. the one that is taking over this team? But we know, and of course you as well, have known that he's kind of been out of the team for a long time now. It's been over 10 years, it seems like. So just maybe, do you know why it's not him and it's Sheila instead?
Well, like I said, I think from what I've been told and the stories that I've read and the people that I've talked to, that really the last big move that Bill Ford Jr. made was when he had his father's ear and persuaded him to hire Matt Millen. Now, obviously, it was a major, major, colossal mistake, but Jr. had a hand in it. I told the story the other day. I can recall many years ago working at WDFN when the Lions hired Bobby Ross. Art Regner, who used to do the Lions post-game shows, and was screaming and hollering and going nuts. Art used to just attack everybody. And it was so much fun to listen to and be a part of as I did the updates on the post-game show every Sunday. And the scoreboards every half hour and 20 minutes. So Art would always rant, rave, and talk about the Ford family. And we're in the lobby of the Silverdome when they hired Bobby Ross. And there's Mr. Ford and obviously Bobby Ross and Chuck Schmidt, the GM. And Bill Jr. is there. And the press conference got done and people are kind of hanging around. And here comes Jr. and he walks towards Mike Stone, our afternoon host, and he goes, hey, what does Art think? And it was like, wait a minute, what? Like, they listen? They hear us? And so you kind of knew that Junior was locked and loaded, and he was locked into knowing what was the pulse of the team and that type of thing. But over the last few years, Junior's run Ford Motor Company, and I think once Dad passed away and handed it off to Mrs. Ford, she chose Sheila. Not saying she didn't choose Bill, but I think there's a falling out there. There's a lot of history with the family when it comes to the Ford Motor Company. And I think Sheila and Martha have been sitting in the corner waiting for their turn. And once the old man passed away, they emerged from the corner and it was their show.
Very interesting. Sounds kind of like that with the Art Regner thing, a little bit like Mike Valeni a couple years ago with that whole Lions fiasco and them leaving the ticket.
It's always something with that organization.
For sure.
That's for sure.
I want to know something else too with Sheila. What's going to happen? You think, if you had a guess, with Quinn and Patricia, and of course the big question about Matthew Stafford as well. I just want to know, what exactly is the direction for them for the future of this team with Sheila as the owner now?
You know what? No, that's a good question. I don't know if I have the answer right now. I would venture to guess that she likes Bob and Matt very much, and I think is going to give them the benefit of the doubt. This team has a chance to win some football games. Their schedule is easy. They have a very good offense. Their defense has improved. How can you not improve from that the disgraceful 30 ranking of 31 out of 32 teams last year? Was not good. So I think she's going to give them the benefit of the doubt. Now, unless they go 5-11 and it gets ugly, 4-12, and Patricia again shows that he can't manage a team, can't manage timeouts, can't manage the clock, then we have problems. But let's say they finish 7-9 or 8-8, and you do see vast improvement. I think she's going to hang on to them. The question, there's so many other questions. Noah, will there be fans in the stands? How many fans will be in the stands with COVID and with what's going on with the pandemic, to the point where will they lose money? And if they lose money, and they're not making a lot of money, and we all know NFL teams get money from TV and everything else, but the Lions aren't swimming in it right now like people think. Well, if you fire these guys, you're going to have to pay them for the next few years. Would you want to be paying 2 coaches and 2 GMs and everything else? That will play a factor too. So I think it's very much up in the air, but I think if they show a little bit of improvement, I think those guys will be back. Quinn for year 6 and Patricia for year 4.
Yeah, well, let's hope that they at least have a season to make some moves in, of course. But speaking of the season, the NFL just announcing a couple days ago that they cut 2 preseason games this year. I know, a lot of people are like, who cares? It's just the preseason. But for a lot of these NFL teams, all 4 games of the preseason really, really matter, especially for those guys like the Jason Huntleys or the Ty Johnsons on the team that might just be like on the bubble to make the roster. Just Talk about, is there any significance in not having 2 preseason games for the Lions specifically?
I mean, I don't think so myself. I think the 4th preseason game is a complete waste of time. The first preseason game is the hype game. It's the game where everybody's just excited that football's back and people are happy to be back, and the slappies are happy to be back in the press box, yucking it up and eating their free food. But when it comes down to it, I do think that games 2 and 3 are the ones that really matter. You see more of the starters in those 2 games. So now if you're going to cut out the New England and Buffalo games and it's just Jets and Miami, for the Lions, those 2 games will be important. The biggest question is, can they practice against other teams? Can they do these squad workouts? And that will all be determined by the doctors and the scientists here. We don't know that yet. I happen to think when the Lions brought the Giants in a couple of years ago, and the Giants actually pushed the Lions around a little bit, that was more telling than some of the preseason games. The Lions getting a chance to practice against the Steelers a few years ago. Same type of thing. There were some guys that stepped up and really had good practice sessions and helped them make the team. If those things can replace the preseason games 1 and 4 that they're now canceling because of the virus, then maybe we've got something here. But it's going to be very interesting because I still question if we're even going to have the season start on time,
Oh, one last thing before we close out here. Of course, just yesterday, I believe, WDFN, the old AM radio station, announcing that they will no longer be covering they will not be having any more sports programming on their radio station. You were an employee for over a decade over there, and I'm sure you've had many, many great memories. So just in honor of that, I just want to know, what was your favorite Lions-related memory as an employee and as a host at WDFN?
Oh, that's a good question, Noah. There's I think we did a pretty good job of never, I was there for 13 years, from 96 to 09. We never had the Lions games, the rights to the games, at least. They were always either at WJR or WWJ, 97.1, 1270, whatever it was. So we weren't the flagship. So we had the ability with hosts and whomever to kind of tell it like it was. When you have a relationship with a team, you got to be very, very careful with how you coddle that relationship. Not to say when the Pistons arrived at DFN did opinions stop, because they didn't, but you did have to do some Pistons-related programming, do some things that they wanted you to do, and they had to do some things you wanted to do, hopefully. And we had a good relationship with them for many years. So with that being said, like I said, I had the chance to work with Art, Steve Courtney, and these guys doing those Sunday afternoon. They used to call it the Sunday afternoon sit-in. They would call it the Special Lions post-game edition. The minute the game ended, that was the beauty of it, is that a game would be over at 4:02, 4:07, 4:15, whatever it was. And the open would fire and Art would come on and just start going off, especially when they lost. And it gave the fans an opportunity to know right away that it was an appointment viewing. For the fans leaving the stadium for home games, at that time it was the Silverdome, they knew to get in their car and get right away to hearing Art and getting opinions and calling in right away. As opposed to with the flagship, if they're on WWJ, you're talking 45 minutes before the post-game host arrived on the show, because you got to do locker room interviews. You have to hear from the coach. You have to take commercial breaks. You got to do the scoreboards. You have to do player interviews, recaps with the analyst at the time, Jim Brandstad, or whatever it was. So with us, it was the special thing that we had was we get right on after and we get the fans on, their reactions. And as far as interviews and stuff goes, whether it was myself or any of the reporters, Greg Brady, John Bloom, Otto, any of these guys, that sound came to us. We were able to get that audio back out. So it's not like people missed it. Yeah, the exclusive interview that the coach would do with Brandstatter, now Patricia does with Lomas, is okay. But the reaction that we could get right after a game was so key, because people knew to tune in right after the game. So a guy like Bill Ford Jr., you can't tell me he wasn't getting in his car and putting us on. And that's the owner's son. So I think that's a memory I'll have, is that we knew we did it right, where we were on the air right away and had fans' reaction and calls and locker room interviews and all that. And it was a good time. It was good radio too.
Oh, that's awesome to hear, especially with kind of could be a little dying down a little bit these days, but it's good that you had those memories to hang on to.
Oh yeah,
sure.
26 years of it being sports. Obviously, January of 2009 was really the official, the original death of the station. It tried to come back a couple of times, and they tried to put some local shows on the air, whether it was Sean Belizean and Killer, Shep. They tried, but that was never a full-on, hey, we're going to have from 6 until 10 at night, local stuff. That never really came back. And then it was the day of the Obama inauguration of 2009, when the station really, Stoney Wojo fired, Sean, Jamie, all these guys were let go. And that was kind of the nail in the coffin, I guess, of the glory years starting in 94.
Yeah, it's sad to hear, but at least you have those memories there. Matt Dery, thank you again for joining us. He hosts the Locked On Lions podcast. He's been doing that for, I believe this is your 5th season, right?
Yes.
5th season? Wow.
Crazy.
Crazy. 5th season hosting that. And you can also follow him on Twitter at Dery Speaks, Dery Speaks. Matt, thank you so much again for joining the podcast here.
All right, Noah, it was a lot of fun, my friend. You take care.
Yeah, you too.
And there you have it. The man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Matt Dery, coming on to Open Mic Night. Glad he was the first ever guest for the podcast, and he's a great one for sure. He's been my mentor for a long time, and he was just a great voice and really a great friend to me, and it's awesome that we could have him on. And he was very, very honored. I was speaking to him earlier, very honored that he was the first guest on Open Mic Night. So awesome that he was able to take time out of his busy schedule to join us here and talk a little Lions football. As I mentioned at the beginning, we will be doing this weekly, talking a little bit about some Detroit sports, so whether it's Lions, Tigers, Pistons, Red Wings, might even bring a little Michigan and Michigan State football in the mix. So it'll be fun and exciting, and I'm really happy that we were able to do this and put this one together for you guys out there, sports deprived. fans out there, if you will. Again, I hope everybody had a great weekend. See you next week, folks, only on Open Mic Night.